In the second talk entitled Change in Pain, I would like to spend some time today talking about the whole concept of addiction, what addiction is, the development of addiction, and also the recovery process for addiction. I know this is a very important talk because I think a lot of us don't understand the meaning of addiction in our society. When we look at addiction, a lot of times we have these concepts of drug addicts and alcoholics and people that basically are hurting themselves and doing damage to themselves. We don't realize that addiction affects all of us in every walk of life. And it's something we have to be aware of, something we have to work on. And I want to approach it again from the holistic point of view. Because as we look at addiction, we look at what happens to us, in this whole concept of development of self. And an addicted person is someone who damages and destroys the concept of self instead of building it up. So when I talk about the concept of addiction, I always talk about it from three basic perspectives: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. Realizing that an addicted person, or someone involved in addiction, is someone who is physically sick, emotionally sick, and spiritually sick. And as a result of this, they have to work on their recovery, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So when we talk about addiction, we begin with the spiritual area. Most people develop their addiction on a spiritual level, and it grows to an emotional level, and then it emphasizes itself in a physical level. And again, when I emphasize this, remember, I'm not just talking about drugs and alcohol. I'm talking about the whole gauntlet of how addiction affects us in our society. Remember some basic things. They're basic to all of us. Whether you realize it or not, your addiction, or the addiction of your choice, probably began at the time you were a little child. Most of us develop certain principles and concepts of our life at the time we're little children. And from that comes our personality, comes our individuality, comes our personhood, and it comes through many, many ways, but it also comes through many, many traumas. Remember some basic things about life, spiritually. The spirituality of any concept of life means how you look at yourself, how you see yourself, how you visualize yourself as a person. So in spiritual addiction, a spiritually addicted person is someone who does not like who they are. They have a negative concept of self, so they always put themselves down. To do this, what I'd like to share with you is some basic principles. They work like this. Whether you realize it or not, the time you were born, all of us in this room were affected in a very special way by 5 basic areas of our life. As we grow up, we are strongly affected by our family. We are strongly affected by our educational and cultural backgrounds. We're very strongly affected by religion. We're extremely affected by our neighborhoods, our environments we grow up in. And of course, we're strongly affected by our peer groups. What happens is, these 5 basic areas of our life develop in us a concept of self. As a child growing up, we pick up from these 5 basic areas an image of ourselves. It's not us. It's not us. It's an image we have of ourselves. Psychologists tell us, if we read the books, psychologists tell us that most children pick up most of the basic principles in their life between the ages of 1 and 7 or 1 and 9. Then we joke a lot and we say we spend the next 80 years trying to adjust them, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of the basic concept of life. But what happens is how it's supposed to happen anyway. Notice I use the word supposed to. When you get to your adolescent and young adult years, you are supposed to rebel against those 5 basic areas. Then you are supposed to develop your own individuality and your own personality. And then get on with living your own personal life. That's how it's supposed to work. The unfortunate part of the psychology books is that we regulate adolescence to the ages of their teenage years, instead of realizing one basic reality. Some of us do not go through that process until we are in our 20s, or our 30s, or our 40s, or our 50s. You see, age has nothing to do with it. Yet sooner or later we have to go through that rebellion process and that growth process to develop the maturity of the gift of you. You know, an author I enjoy reading a lot, Jess Lair, often says that the rebellion process for most people really happens around the mid-30s. And that really that's when his happened, and where a lot of us begin to go through that process of real growth in our life. So we begin to realize that adolescence and that change pattern comes later for most of us. Now, watch what happens in the case of addiction. One of the reasons why people are not able to make that change or make that development of their own individuality at that age is because very many of us are stuck in a pattern. Unfortunately, when we talk about addiction, and probably the best definition that I have of addiction, and I share it with you, an addicted person is anyone who lives in fear, guilt, and dependency. Now, you'll notice I didn't mention drugs or alcohol. Anyone who lives in fear, guilt, or dependency. Now, if you come out of a family structure that teaches you how to always be afraid, to be scared all the time, never to stand on your own 2 feet. You come out of a family structure that's always teaching you how to be guilty and using guilt to keep you under control. You come out of a family structure that's always making you dependent and will not allow you a sense of independence. If you're always in that kind of a structure, then you're being taught all your life to be afraid, to be guilty, to be fearful, to be dependent. So as a result, you grow up that way. If you look at our educational and our cultural systems, very many of our cultural systems we grow up in, our ethnic and cultural systems, teach us fear and guilt. We have what we call the unwritten laws in families. There's certain traditions that we do and we follow and we program and we live that way, and nothing can change it. If you do, somebody's going to come and get you. These are all basic concepts. Also, many of our educational systems, it's unfortunate, but very many of our educational systems do not educate us, especially to self. They educate us to facts and figures. And as a result, we grow up knowing what's wrong, knowing the negative, but not knowing the positive concept of self. So as a result, we are trained to be dependent on our educational system because from it we learn fear and guilt. Again, look at our religious cultures, our religious backgrounds. Very many of our religions very definitely teach fear and guilt. It's unfortunate. As we grow up, we are taught a God of fear, a God of guilt, a God of dependency, and dependencies are taught to us. And so if you look at that whole definition, anything that teaches fear and guilt wants you to be dependent. It creates dependency instead of independency. The same thing as regards our neighborhoods or our environments. So many of us are scared to death to be different. We live in certain neighborhoods and certain environments, and there's a certain way you're supposed to live. If you're in that neighborhood or that environment, there's a certain code you're supposed to live up to. If you want to be accepted, you want to be part of that environment. And so many of us are scared to death to be different. So we try to make everything the same. That's sad. That's really sad. But fear and guilt do that to us. Fear is our greatest enemy. Although fear is a myth and guilt is a myth. Once you face it, it goes away. You have the power within you to do that, and we'll share that later. But very many times as we're growing up, our neighborhoods teach us fear because we want to fit in with the Joneses, fit in with the people next door, be part of the crowd. And of course, along with that goes our peer groups. Our peer pressure is unbelievable. It's probably one of the strongest influences in the area of addiction because peers are people we want to belong to. We don't want to be different from anybody else. So we're scared of that sense of individuality, which is real spirituality. So the reality, real simple, is that we are spiritually addicted because we are living in fear, living in guilt, living in dependency. So as a result, we are stuck. And that stuck process is scary. It means that we can't move. We can't make those changes. We can't move on with our life. We can't do things because we're stuck in that process. And when you're stuck, you live in frustration. You live in insecurity. You live emotional. You live all bent out of shape. And you do a lot of projection and growing within yourself. It's scary. So as a result, we have to learn something. We have to learn that to be spiritually addicted means I don't like who I am. I don't like where I am. I don't like what I'm doing. But I'm stuck. I can't make changes. Since I can't make the changes, then I become spiritually sick and spiritually addicted, and I put myself down and I begin to beat myself up because I have no concept of my own self-esteem. Now, in that process, what happens then is we then start to become emotionally sick. Because the spirituality, if we don't have good spirituality, leads us to emotional sickness. And our emotional sickness means we begin to act out that behavior pattern. We begin to act out that lack of self-esteem. We begin to act that out in all of our behavior patterns in life. So we take on a very distinct personality when we are emotionally sick. That personality, I love using in addiction. It's a very simple personality, but it's the personality of what I call king or queen baby. And it works like this. I want what I want when I want it. Give it to me or I'll beat you up. I demand it right now. What I do is I use my emotions to use other people. I use my emotions to get what I want, instead of using my individuality and my personality. I base everything on emotions. So what I do is I get into self-pity, I get into anger, I get into frustration, I get into guilt, I use fear, I dump it on everybody else, it plays back and forth, and I begin to play this emotional baby game. And it means that I'm regressing, not growing. And most of us in this emotional stage of our addiction are what I call pre-adolescents. That's how pre-adolescent kids are. And we can't make that step into adolescence and then into adulthood. So what happens is we stay stuck. And here we are now, we have adult bodies, and we're growing as adults, and we have all these basic childish concepts emotionally. And as a result, we can't express ourselves and we can't be ourselves, and it's scary. So we are emotionally sick, and it tears us apart on the inside. It's scary. So as a result, we run around like a little child, like a little boy, a little girl. We can't make changes, we can't make decisions, we can't grow, and we're scared, and we're guilty, and we feel bad. And so as a result, we stay stuck in that. We're mired right into addiction. We don't even know it. Because we never look at addiction from an emotional and spiritual perspective. We only look at it from a physical perspective. And so what happens is, if you begin to tear yourself apart spiritually, you tear yourself apart emotionally, and you begin to put yourself down, you begin to act and live in this emotional area. You're living every day when you wake up, you're living in fear and you're living in guilt. Now watch what happens. The addiction will then move to the physical level. You will then begin to experience what I call physical symptoms. Because your body is out of sync emotionally and spiritually, now your body begins the addictive process of beginning to get sick and beginning to break down. Our body talks to us constantly. Our body is an expression of our fears and our guilts. So as a result, our body then begins to break down physically. For example, some of the basic areas we can talk about in physical addiction, one of the major areas is malnutrition. Isn't it amazing when you look at our society and look around you, you realize in the past 25 or 30 years how many hundreds and thousands of fast food chains have developed? Because what has happened is we have begun to become a society that lives around addiction. So as a result, what happens is we very basically, because we don't have a good emotional and spiritual self, physically we start to malnutrition ourselves. Our body starts to break down. We don't take care of it. We also experience things like high blood pressure, migraine headaches, different things to this effect, all kinds of tension and pressure, stress-related diseases, cancer, things to this effect that are happening right now. All these things are examples of the high stress and the emotional level that we operate on instead of that deep, simple spiritual level. So as a result, all these things are the chasers. They are the things that lead us. They are the things that are the effect of our addiction. They tear us apart tremendously. In the physical level, then we choose things like drugs or alcohol, or we compulsively overeat. We choose things like gambling. We choose addictions, fanaticism things that will keep us from dealing with the self and developing the self. So as a result, our body is not dumb, by the way. Our body knows us very well. If you listen to your body, you'll learn and you'll grow. But your body says to you, hey, I am tired of the emotional stress you're putting me under. I am sick and tired of you beating yourself to death. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to fall apart. We take a look at our society and the very many nervous conditions, the psychiatric conditions, people that are constantly in emotional turmoil. And as a result, we begin to see that's an end result of not being healthy emotionally and spiritually. So addiction progresses. Unfortunately, if we don't deal with our addiction on a physical level, it will then begin to grow even deeper. It will then grow to the next level. The next level is scary. It's a level of death or insanity. It's a very scary level. Because eventually, if we beat ourselves to death, we eventually will die. Our body will then begin to give up on itself. Or we'll go to the insanity level, where very basically we can no longer care for ourselves, so we actually break ourselves down and allow somebody else to take over the care of us. Because we have regressed all the way back to the little child, and now we have to have somebody take care of us again. We get caught up in that whole system of insanity, that system of craziness, and we like it, because I can be a little kid again. I don't have to grow anymore. I am now caught in the cycle of addiction, the obsession of addiction. I use drugs, or I use alcohol, or I use different types of addiction, or I use compulsive overeating, or I use all these different things. I use them primarily because they are ways out for me. They are ways of masking. I'm not dealing with the self, but the individual within me, but the healthy person inside of me. And so addiction develops. It develops on a negative level. It develops spiritually, then it develops emotionally, then it develops physically. And the addiction, when it develops on that level, what it does is it actually begins to tear me apart. See, the addictive process can do so much damage to us. It can begin to really do damage to us on all three levels. And so as a result, we have to learn the recovery process. I emphasize this primarily because realize that most of us in our lifetime have spent a long time investing in our addiction. Our addiction very basically has something we have spent time on, effort on, and we have a major investment in it. That's why to begin to let go of the addiction within us, to begin to make changes, is so painful. That's why it hurts so much. We actually have to learn how to separate from the old us, the sick us, the little child inside of us, and begin and allow this process of growth to begin to happen. And it's scary. It's very scary. Because when you begin to allow that to happen, you then begin to make changes. You begin to grow. Your life begins to become pretty powerful, pretty special. So now what I'd like to do, because I emphasized the time we spent developing our addiction, we have to emphasize the time we have to spend developing our recovery. And recovery is very special, and it works. So when we talk about recovery, we talk about it again from those same three basic perspectives: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. But in the recovery process, we begin on the physical level, move to the emotional, and then develop the spiritual level. And it's extremely important. You see, first thing we have to learn physically is if we are going to begin this process of recovery, we have to learn how to repair our bodies. For the alcoholic and the drug addict, they have to experience what we call physical detox. They have to actually take the physical concept of addiction out of their system. For people in general, we have to learn to begin to look at our bodies and treat our bodies positively and specially. That means to begin to build energy levels back into our body, to begin to feed it properly, exercise it properly, and take care of it. It's the beginning stages of recovery. Because when the body begins to get strong, you begin to treat it good, then you can begin to get in touch with and begin to work on the emotional part of your body. It's like a step program. The physical comes first, then the emotional, and then the spiritual. And they all fall right into place and they connect to each other. But as you begin to build the energy level inside of your body and your body starts to feel better, you'll then be able to experience the part of recovery that is the hardest. You see, once you stop using your addiction and once you start making these healthy decisions, once you start making changes in your life, the pain begins to come. It's the pain of growth. It's a beautiful concept of pain, even though going through it is not beautiful. It's not beautiful at all. And yet later on, when you look back on it, you'll realize why you had to go through it. The second stage of recovery, the emotional stage, emotional recovery, means you have to allow yourself to go through the separation, the loss, the letting go of what was before. You have to feel the pain of that letting go, the pain of that loss. You have to go through that process. If you don't allow yourself to go through that process, you'll just make an intellectual decision, and that's not enough. It's got to be a gut decision also. And yet that takes time to process it. They tell us the emotional detox process takes anywhere from 18 months to 3 years to be able to begin to make major changes in your life, major decisions in your life, and major areas of your life. To make those major changes means you got to take that time process and allow it to happen so that you can really process this change within you emotionally. Because your emotional system has to get back in the kilter, get back in the balance. You have to learn to grow emotionally. What you're actually doing to yourself is you are now taking the physical you that you're working on, you feel good about. You are now beginning the emotional process of allowing that pre-adolescent child to now begin to become the adolescent. You're allowing yourself to begin the rebellion process and the change process. You're allowing it now to happen. For most of us, it's a very scary moment of our life because it means that we have to rebel against things in our life. Family, education, religion, neighborhoods, environments, peer groups, pressure, things around us. We also have to begin to rebel against them and to realize that we can stand away from them and we'll be okay. And it's hard for us to realize that. But as you begin to make this process of becoming an adolescent, it means you're going to challenge all these areas of your life. What happens when you challenge these areas, and please remember this, when you challenge them, you don't know what's going to happen. But it means it's growing up time. And it means getting in touch with your feelings, getting in touch with your emotions. It means to stop being a robot. It means to begin to get into reality and feel reality. You know, sometimes reality isn't so nice. But when you feel it and you get in touch with it, then you will grow. It becomes part of you. So we have to learn a healthy thing in our life. It's called balance. It's hard for us. Because we stay stuck sometimes in our make-believe honeymoons. And even in our real honeymoons. And then reality is the greatest gift of all because reality is the teacher. Reality brings life into us. It brings us into reality. As it brings you into reality, then you can really begin to live. You can really begin to make decisions. You can really begin to start to let go of the fear and guilt that's inside of you. Because you no longer are dependent. You are independent. It's a difference between the two. Learning that beautiful gift of independence, of individuality and personhood is the hardest part of recovery. That's why it takes so long. You have to learn it. You have to work on it. You have to process it. It doesn't just happen because you wake up one morning and decide it's going to happen. It doesn't work that way. You have to actually let it happen and go through the process. You have to be willing to make changes, willing to make that bridge and cross that bridge to your real growth within. You have to be willing to take chances, to take risks. That's why so many of us stay clear of emotional growth. We don't like emotional growth because now we have to begin to process things. We have to begin to feel things inside, own things that are ours, develop a sense of self, begin to realize I am an emotional person, I have feelings, I'm allowed to have feelings. And begin not to allow anybody else to own my feelings or take my feelings away from me. To begin to own things for me. I am now growing emotionally. I am growing as a person. To begin to realize that, yes, I have anger inside of me. I always refer to the major areas we have to work on. One of them is anger. That it's okay to be angry. That I can be angry. That I can use anger in a healthy fashion. That there are situations in life I don't have to like. But I can actually be angry about them. And that it's okay for me to be that. So many of us cannot give ourselves permission to feel basic emotions. To feel the emotion of joy, the emotion of peacefulness, the emotion of just basically understanding that guilt too is an emotion, fear is an emotion, self-pity is an emotion, jealousy is an emotion. But to realize these are all parts of me that I can feel, but they do not have to destroy me. See, what you're doing at this point is you are taking all these emotions that you always labeled as negative. You are beginning a very special process in the emotional recovery area. You are taking these emotions, you are beginning to allow them to become your growth areas. That's kind of beautiful when you can do it. Because now I can realize I can feel jealousy, but I'm not going to allow jealousy to destroy me. I can feel it and learn from it and grow from it. And I'm not going to allow my fear to tear me apart. I'm going to look at my fear and realize it's there. I have to admit to it. As I admit to it, I can begin to overcome it. I can begin to make peace with it. I can then begin to let go of it. When I let go of it, it's not there anymore. Now it's a myth. Same thing with my guilt. I can look at why I'm guilty and feel the guilt. and acknowledge the fact that I am guilty. And then begin to process that guilt. Let that guilt begin to grow. Let that guilt begin to change. Let it become something positive for me. So I'm learning something very special on my emotional growth. I am learning that all these negative things I labeled as negative really aren't negative. They are simply moments of my life that are teaching me to develop the positive person within. And it's so neat when you begin to learn that. It's so special. Because you're realizing, hey, it's okay for me to be human. It's okay for me to realize my humanness. It's okay for me to feel whatever I feel, because feelings are neither right nor wrong. They're just feelings, and you're allowed to have them. Do you realize how hard it is to give yourself permission to believe that? Especially when you've been trained in all that crazy stuff from all those areas of your life. Do you realize how you're rebelling against all those areas I talked about? Because feelings are just feelings. You can feel whatever you feel, and it's okay. We have to learn to stop beating ourselves up and stop being guilty and stop tearing ourselves apart, but to begin to realize that it's a normal process of life. That we can now begin to go through that adolescence and begin to mature and grow and become an adult. It's scary. It's nice. But it means you're accepting responsibility for your own life. It means you are growing. It means you are discovering the gift of you. That's called emotional growth. Emotional growth. Emotional recovery. But see, emotional recovery simply means that I am now beginning to get honest inside of me. I'm beginning to feel the things that I feel within. I'm beginning to talk about them. So many of us have blocked feelings off from ourselves for so long, because we're always taught as kids growing up, you're not allowed to feel. If you feel, it's sinful. If you feel, it's this. If you feel, it's that. But you have all kinds of feelings inside of you. Feel them. Experience them. Let them be part of you, because they are part of your emotional growth. The important thing to remember is use them in a healthy fashion. Use them for your growth. Don't run away from them. Face them. You know, so many times we avoid things. We're the greatest avoiders in the whole world. And avoiding, very basically, is running. And we isolate. We run away. Instead of realizing I have to face things, when I face them, I can finally get strong. I can finally realize I made these decisions and they're healthy. I can realize I no longer have to be guilty about them or fearful about them, and no longer dependent. That's the independence, the individuality. It's accepting responsibility for my life. It's growing up. It's being who I am. When I do that, then I stop worrying about what this one thinks and that one thinks and the other one thinks. I stop looking for approval and affirmation. Look, at any major change you make in your life, no matter what it is, one of the main obstacles to major changes in your life on an emotional level is because you are worried about what other people are going to think. I have a little standing joke. It's kind of interesting. 25% of the people, like your decision. 25% don't. And 50% of the population doesn't give two damns one way or the other. That's basic reality. We have to realize that. We can't live our life based around that. But at the same time, we have to grow emotionally. Feel the feelings. Listen to what happens. Look what happens inside of us. Feel that emotional strength. And as time goes on, it takes time. You got to be patient. As time goes on, you get stronger, and you get stronger, and you get stronger. Then, you don't have to shut that head off anymore. Now you can allow that head to process properly. You can begin to process things. You have the balance between your emotions and your head. You have a balance in your life. And now you are growing. Now you're becoming an adult. As you begin to process this emotionally, you then begin to develop inside of yourself your own private self, your own private life. You are comfortable with you, so therefore you are at peace with you, and your emotions begin to grow in a very special way. It's very beautiful. This is the beauty of emotional wellness. If you become emotionally well, then what happens next is you begin to develop that spiritual well-being. And by the way, emotional and spiritual well-being work side by side. That spiritual well-being means I can now begin to learn how to love me and like me, because I am now comfortable with me. I have now allowed myself to let go of all those areas of my life that have torn me apart and put me down, because I have allowed them to. But I can now begin to give myself permission for my own spiritual growth, for my spirituality within. That's why at this stage I always begin to talk about that very special spiritual program called the 12 Steps. See, these 12 simple principles, these 12 steps, are the 12 principles of life. Those 12 principles are based around self-discipline. They are based around self-growth. They are based around self-knowledge. They are based around understanding of self. After a period of time, you realize that you have very little influence on other people, but you have a tremendous influence on yourself. And then automatically, as you grow emotionally and spiritually, you will attract people to you that are also growing emotionally and spiritually. And then you will share things with each other. It's the sharing. You don't give somebody your own personal individuality. You give them the excess of you. You share with somebody else. But you always keep your own individuality and your own personality. You keep your own self. Your own self belongs to you. It's special. It's unique. It's yours, and yours only. And that spirituality means I take that individual self of mine and I develop it with my higher power, with my God as I understand Him. So I have a spiritual base, a foundation in me, and it's solid. And it means that now I am growing spiritually. It means I can experience powerlessness. I can experience honesty. It means I can let go of negative things. It means I can look at my life and not be afraid of it anymore. I can look at decisions in my life and realize I made them. I accept the responsibility for them. I can grow with them. I start to trust other people. I allow people to get close to me. And I realize I don't need a lot of people either. But I allow special people to get close to me. I now begin to grow spiritually. I allow myself my humanness. I allow myself mistakes. I allow growth within my own life. I stop putting so much pressure on myself that I've got to be perfect every day. I don't have to be perfect. I'm just me today, and what is. And I learn and I grow from it. I can learn that I can make amends. I can settle situations in my life. I can let go of things. In some ways, I learned to make direct amends and indirect amends, but I learned to make amends. But I remember I no longer injure or harm anybody else because I work on developing me and I grow within. Then I have learned the beautiful concept of self-discovery, that's spirituality. I have learned holistically that I have a beautiful spirit inside, and my spirit is special. I have learned that my emotional self is special, that I can take my feelings and share my feelings and grow with my feelings. I also learned that I can take care of my physical self. And as I do that, I start to become a whole person, a total person, a real person, a person that lives in reality. No longer need the grandiosity, no longer need all that craziness, all that insanity, because now I have the specialness of me, the uniqueness of me, and who I choose to share me with, I can choose to share myself with. I can give my gift away to whoever I want to give it to, but I no longer have to hide my gift, the gift of me. It's beautiful. That's one of the reasons why I spend so much time emphasizing the spirituality of recovery, and so much time emphasizing the beautiful gift of the 12 steps. Over the next series of talks, I want to spend a lot of time working on the 12 steps. The 12 steps are very special and they are very beautiful. And they will help us in recovery. But again, we have to realize that recovery means growing physically, emotionally, spiritually. Recovery means developing the person within. Total recovery means working on making total changes in our life. I entitled this talk, Change in Pain, because I realized something very special. As we begin the recovery process, we have to learn something. There is no recovery without pain, even though it isn't so happy to go through pain. But the reality is that our pain leads us to our gain. It leads us to our recovery. To be a holistic person, we have to be willing to get in touch with every aspect of self, every concept of self. And that there's no such thing as perfect things, euphoria, things that will always be perfect. Reality deems and tells us that we have to always be growing, always learning, always discovering, always be open, always discovering new things within ourselves. So I sum up this talk on change and pain in a very simple way. In the course of your life, you will experience a lot of very special moments. I call them honeymoons. You'll experience them and they'll be very beautiful. But you'll also experience in the course of life the beautiful gift of reality. And realities are painful sometimes. And sometimes they smack you right in the face. But that's okay, because that will give you the healthy, beautiful, physical, emotional, and spiritual balance in life. And balance is the beauty of the whole thing. So I share this talk primarily because I think it's important for us to realize that we made a big investment in the crazy part of our life, the insane part of our life. We made a big investment in the negative areas of our life. We have to learn to make the same investment in the positive areas of our life. Life is an investment. Life is very special. And life is yours. It belongs to you. Nobody else. Your life is your own unique testimony to who you are and where you are. You can allow that testimony to be with yourself and to be with others. You can allow the specialness of your own life. Do not be afraid of changing. Do not be afraid of growing. Do not be afraid of pain. It's hard going through it, but don't go through it alone. Realize you have a very special program, the 12-step program. You have a very special process that will help you through it. But you also have people that will help you through it. They'll be with you as you go through it. It's a beautiful part of all growth in life. Again, remember, none of us can do this all by ourselves. We need our program. We need each other. We need help and support. We need to process things. And we need to be able to open up and begin to grow. So my prayer for all of you is that each and every one of us will allow ourselves to grow physically, to see the potential, the energy, and the strength of our body. It's something very beautiful and very special. To allow ourselves to grow emotionally, to begin to feel our feelings, to become real with our feelings, to live in the reality of who we are, to begin to experience those feelings and grow from them. But above all, to grow spiritually, to realize we have the gift within to become lovers. We have the gift within to be able to be likable and lovable. We have the gift within to be respectful, to respect ourselves and treat ourselves good. We have the gift within to care for ourselves, to grow in the spiritual realm. And that spiritual realm grows so beautifully from the 12 simple principles of life called the steps. I share this with you, and I realize how this gift will teach us what life is. It will teach us the gift of us. And as this gift grows, and as we grow, and as life grows, we will share this gift very naturally with other people. And as we share it, we will share the beauty of self, the beauty of recovery. Thanks for listening. I really enjoyed sharing. Good luck.